Okay. Hi there, everybody. Looks like nobody's logged in yet, but I think I'm going to start. This is going to be recorded. It is being recorded and uploaded. You'll be able to watch it later on Google Plus and also on YouTube. I'll probably take it down from YouTube after a week or so to out of respect for Dave, and this is his material, which he gave me permission. I told him all you guys wanted to know more about the training, and so I got permission from him. He said I could share whatever I like. Okay, so this was the Rupture and Repair training with Abby Blakesley and Dave Berger in Austin, December 5th. And we talked a lot about the relational field and parasympathetic charge. And also we talked an awful lot about sensing yourself in the relational field, especially when you're working with clients or whenever you're in relationship. Some of the things, I'll just dive in. Some of the things he said, they said culturally, we have an underdeveloped parasympathetic, and we talked a lot about developing parasympathetic access with clients. 3 books were recommended I wanted to mention. And about reading these books, Dave and Abby said to try to hold the theory and then let it go. So one book is Sensing, Feeling, and Action by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. Another one is On How Life Moves by Karen McCoes, MCHOES, I think, or HOOS, On How Life Moves. And then the other one is Bone, Breath, Gesture by Don Hanlon Johnson. We talked a lot about trying to catch the movements of clients, and we talked about what movements we're actually looking for in terms of some infant developmental reflexes like the Moro, and which that one's about falling. So there could be 2 responses. It could be shoulders forward, or it could be a back, the arched back. And then the asymmetric tonic neck reflex, which is the out to the side. And so the important part there is the hand can be this way or it can be this way. So it could be about getting space or distance or protection, or it could be about receiving. And Dave gave some nice examples of, something like somebody will be talking and they'll point like, like that way, like it's over there. And you can ask, what if you explore that, the reach and the looking that way, what happens? Some things you could think about, when you're looking for movements, what age does the movement seem to suggest? And then there's an order to the emerging responses or body reflexes. The analogy they give was you have to be ducks to land, but you have to be fish first. So the protection has to be established first. And that, for humans up until 18 months, we don't have the hardware for a parasympathetic nervous system. That's the caregiver's role, that parasympathetic nervous system. And so for sometimes that's going to be missing for a lot of clients, and we are going to be just like when the parent for that first 18 months or so is the parasympathetic nervous system for the child. We will be that for our clients often for that first 18 months. Clients, it's underdeveloped. You have the blueprint. It's just underdeveloped. It's still not, neurophysiologically, it's still not entirely fully developed at 18 months. And when they start to feel better, when they start to be able to tap into parasympathetic charge, keep having them connect with the feeling, noticing feeling better when it happens. We had a lot of conversation about what is high vagal tone, and I think I'm still a little bit confused about that, but dorsal vagal dominant means less energy going through the dorsal vagal branch. So that means you have to increase tone to turn it back on. And high dorsal vagal tone is unhealthy after even a few minutes because there's changes to carbon dioxide levels. Those go up and become toxic. Heart rate becomes irregular. The digestion muscles aren't working as well. And we also talked about how there's very few situations where there will be actually pure sympathetic, pure ventral vagal, pure dorsal vagal tone, that you're always going to have these like layers. You're going to have some of the others at the same time. Orienting stimulates the ventral vagal. So I thought that was an interesting thing I wasn't aware of. People with continuous yawning, somebody asked about a client for that. They said it's an attempt to settle and it's probably stuck, and you can ask the client to delay the yawn and see what happens. And also, hair pulling is actually stimulating mastication muscles, which I never would have guessed. So that's another attempt to get at our ventral vagal. So you can have people massage their face and exercise their face muscles. We got a breakdown of what the VOO sound actually does. So there's like a list of about 6 things. It's mechanically stimulating the digestive tract. There's the sensation, the vibratory sensation, which can have a pleasant feeling. The exhaling until the body breathes back in on its own. After you completely exhale, it actually triggers a healthier oxygen to carbon dioxide balance. The body does it all by itself when you do the long exhale. And then sound stimulates laryngeal muscles, which is about social engagement. There was, I don't remember exactly how this one piece is related, but there's increased capacity in the body. Literally, it creates more space in the body because of the relaxation that's induced. There's a sensation of more space. And then the deeper sounds, depending on, we don't usually say woo, we usually use a lower sound. The VOO vibrates the bones of the lower face and jaw. So there's more ventral vagal stuff going on there too. And about freeze, we had a lot of conversation about freeze doesn't have to be rigid. Freeze doesn't mean that somebody is like totally stop still or completely gone dissociated. There are all these different layers and levels, and it's best thought of as tonic immobility. Because like if you think of people who are in freeze who participate in stuff that they're coerced or forced to do, they're not frozen. There's still movement and action, but the tonic immobility is going on there. At some level, they have to disconnect from what's going on in order to participate. So helping people come out of tonic immobility can involve something as simple as just having them do something different, and then try to have a conversation about whatever the different is in the moment. We had a lot of focus on the relational field and using the relational field with the client in order to have a conversation about ventral vagal, about relational stuff that's happening in the moment, rather than talking about parents or past or relationships outside the room. You can use the relationship that's there in the moment. And I loved, Abby had lots of good ways to not in a non-threatening way to ask if clients could participate or be willing to try things. So would you be willing to explore moving face muscles, opening or smiling? Can you imagine what face you would have wanted to see when you were born? There was a case that was presented about a new mom who was dysregulated and had dyadic dysregulation with the kid. And we're talking a lot about this connection between heart and gut. We did lots of exercises as a group where relax the tongue and then follow that relaxation all the way down to the pelvic floor. And especially as the therapist, noticing in this rupture and repair process what's happening inside of us as we are there with the client, and that we want to really stay in that place. And the relational field is supported by us staying in our bodies, not leaving and fixing and the client, if the client's relying on us for a parasympathetic charge and we're freaking out, then we're going for a roller coaster ride, basically. Away from that case, there was a list of things, a way to support shifting blandness that you might notice in the face. So when people's affect seem in their facial expression seems muted, or even, I bet even in the voice as well. You can work with the face and moving the face muscles, exercising or massaging the face. You can use the VU sound. And then because this is connected with the belly, you can also rub the belly or suggest to the client rubbing the belly, or you can do it together. So you're basically having the client do their own body work. And they can VU and rub the belly at the same time. So that increases ventral vagal tone. And a really nice suggestion I liked for folks that have trouble with staying present for difficulty sensations or emotions, recommended trying out this phrase, feel the pain, but don't be the fear. So doing those two things at the same time. A lot of practice softening tongue all the way down to the pelvic floor. And noticing the startle response above the waist, and then notice what happens below as as you touch into the startle response, what's also going on below. Let's see. Rupture. So the whole class, all 4 days, we kept joking about ruptures and repairs and how that really is the basis for a relationship. That anger, for example, is an opportunity for the relationship to move to a higher level. And any kind of rupture actually, with good repair, strengthens the relationship. So we can educate our clients about that as well, that the goal isn't really to have no ruptures, it's to have really good repair. And someone asked about, is there any time limit on repair? And so I thought that was interesting. They said, ideally, as soon as possible after the rupture. But nobody wanted to put a limit on the possibility, like how long after. And there were some examples about, repair decades later that was still helpful. Lots of ways we can, and so ruptures can be hard to identify. And that's actually the first job when we're working with our clients. Identifying the ruptures is the first job in the relational field, and also working with their stuff, with their content. Another good way to talk to people is to say, I saw something happen when I said X, and I wonder what's happening in you. We could notice for clients something like, I noticed that it seemed like your body couldn't quite take that in. What did you notice? Or I'm curious, as I say that, what you notice in you. So all these different ways of framing in interoceptive or the felt sense without saying, what do you feel in your body? We also did a lot of couples work, because relational work, early relational trauma winds up showing up in primary relationships in an adult life. And some of the things that you can do when you're working with couples, because we talked a lot about receiving and how both parties in the relational field are actually receiving, even though we might think somebody is the receiver, the recipient, and we're giving. If we explore the felt sense, and we had opportunities to do this in class, you can notice that you are actually, the giver is also actually receiving. And so in couples work, you could initiate or set it up to have a couple practice. Can the initiator wait for the receiver to receive? I think that was really important, because lots of times the receiver can't receive, or the message gets distorted, or there's just not enough, there's time pressure. And you can create space for dyads to allow time for the system to repair. And I actually got to do this with a couple really recently, where they were sitting there and one person said something and the other person couldn't take it in. And they would not, if I had said, do you want some more space between you? They would not have said yes. So I initiated half of the half of the couple that was having difficulty taking in. I had them move to a different chair. And it was really interesting to watch this couple's work and to get a feel, to see it more than once, and to get a feel of the rhythm of it. It's kind of like unhooking, so uncoupling the couple, and then working with the usually the person with the highest charge, because the low charge person is fine just hanging out there, and facilitate some sort of a shift, and then recouple, and then see what happens. And a lot of that has to do with over and over having them notice the space, notice themselves, and then notice the felt sense of the space that's in between them. And it was really cool. It just kind of unfolded naturally, and there was a shift, and then the dynamic was really apparent, and they were both laughing about noticing their dynamic. It was right there. The quality of the repair is more important than quantity. Okay. I'm wondering if any of you have any questions. There's a little Q&A box on the side. Oh, it says mine is disabled. Let's see. Oops, I turned off my camera accidentally for a second. I'm back. I'm trying to figure out a way for you guys to be able to, oh, here we go. You guys can go to group chat. And so feel free to type any questions in there. Group chat is that square in the upper left corner of your screen. If you click on that little blue box with the lines in it, the group chat box will come up on the right-hand side. Okay. We talked a lot about the insula, and meditators have thicker right anterior insula. We got a lot of stuff. We got neurophysiology, but we also got a lot of how to work with. So we talked about structures of attachment versus the behavioral attachment pieces. So what is the physiology of the attachment structures, and then looking from the outside, or how people are responding, what does the behavioral piece look like? Hang on a second. Okay. Let's see. They said to focus on counter vortex when client goes to the trauma vortex. And I think that's something that we already know. But there was a lot of focus on health and staying with the stuff that's working, really spending more time and emphasis on what's working, what's going right, as a way to build. And I totally can get how that helps to build a pathway into building parasympathetic access, building the parasympathetic nervous system for people. People with thicker insulas have a lot easier time reading their partners, and they have a lot easier time reading their own internal felt sense. And so when you start to work with clients and they say, what does this have to do with my whatever, the thing I came in for, you can connect the dots for them that noticing body sensations actually is thickening their insula, which will make it easier for them to read their partner. And the more accurately they can read their partner, not to mention themselves, the better communication is going to be. So I liked that. That was a really nice in for people that have they're highly guarded or don't have a lot. So you're trying to build that felt sense or build that insula so that they can stay, they can do the work, they can communicate with their partner better. And there's the reason, there's the how that what you're doing with them is actually creating some kind of a difference. You want to help people stay or have a neutral or positive experience in their body to build the insula. Then you can start to build the parasympathetic, and you name and mirror the parasympathetic shifts and behaviors. The insula is the thing that helps us distinguish self from other, and it's called the seat of selfhood. It mediates basic and complex trust and mistrust, or basic and complex emotions like trust or mistrust, altruism, rejection. So you can do insula workouts with clients. You can have them feel or evoke some image that's pleasurable, or the feeling of trust or of mistrust or virtue, some virtue that they care about. Inspiration, beauty, altruism, and then have them touch into that connection with the parasympathetic, with the structures that are involved in feeling those emotions. Let's see. So there is some interesting research by Daniel Amen, the brain guy, that says superficial structures of the brain, so the more outer structures of the brain, are impacted by concussion and head injuries, and that the deeper structures, so the parts that are buried and more central to our brain, are impacted by PTSD or early dysregulation. So it's interesting if you think about how the more inner or core structures of the brain are related to sense of self, seat of sensing self and ability to sense other people, how those two different kinds of injuries are impacting us. The insula also helps direct attention to salient stimuli to trigger appropriate autonomic arousal and moving into action. So there's a cascade of emotional arousal and responses, hiding, fighting, whatever. So that's another good reason to have a well-developed insula so that you can respond appropriately to threat. Let's see. Let's see. A lot of brain stuff that I'm not going to bore you guys with. Oxytocin levels vary with the area of the skin. So touch isn't universally stimulating oxytocin. So depending on where we are touched, there are different levels. And so another exercise for couples you can do is receiving touch. So really just very neutral touch on the arm or on the knee or leg area around the knee. Can you receive your partner's skin, or can you receive the sensation of touching your partner? He said backs of hands and forearms are pretty neutral. And so this is another way of activating ventral vagal. So social engagement system can be accessed this way. And that visual information and working with the eyes is a really powerful way to get to the ventral vagal, but it also it can access trauma really quickly. It can go to the emotional part. True power is a state of flow between heart and pelvis. And physically on the inside, the structures are that we're actually connected from our eyes all the way down to the pelvic floor. There was a really interesting exercise, or what's that? There's a demo where Dave had somebody who didn't have good access to the internal felt sense. He just made this motion or this gesture, get on the elevator, and then he motioned down, all the way down, and was able to activate for her the relaxation of the tongue and all the way down to the pelvic floor, just with this elevator analogy. He didn't say, feel it inside or check inside or anything. He just said, get inside the elevator and go down. That was pretty cool. And some of the receiving exercises we did had this involvement of, noticing the eyes being connected to the pelvic floor, which just, you can use a simple object. You can look at anything and first look at it and then see what happens if you relax the tongue and then start to let that relaxation go all the way down to the pelvic floor. Notice what happens to the image. Generally, you find that there's a sort of softening in the eyes, and you can really feel the shift between looking at or trying to grab at something and actually receiving. And I think that could be a good experience for clients who are ready for that, to be able to have an experience of receiving and what that's actually like to receive. And receiving all the way in, all the way down. And the relaxation, the connection, the flow between eyes and pelvic floor is what allows that real receiving feeling to happen. You can have clients experiment with the difference between pelvic floor being clenched or up, or feeling themselves sort of up and out of their bodies almost, and then relax. And he used the analogy a lot when in our visualization exercises of imagine you're on the way to a meeting and you don't have time to go to the bathroom or something, and you have to hold it, and like what those muscles would do with that suggestion. So for the class, we would just sit and come into our eyes, soften the eyes and the pelvic floor, and then notice what's happening. And I think that's something that some clients could be possibly ready for. And sort of like you're naming the data, like, oh, when you do that, what else happens? What are all the other things you notice happening in the cascade of reactions or sensations in the body or thoughts or images or whatever? And so culturally, we talked about eye contact and how that's different, and direct eye contact. Some cultures are averse to that. So you can take in the skin, and you can also do any kind of peripheral tracking. So all the stuff around the eyes and parts of the body, and reduce that intensity or reduce that confrontational feeling. They had this really cool analogy for dyadic regulation. They said it's like when you're swimming and you're racing someone swimming, you dive into the water and you swim really hard and you don't know who hit the wall first. And that's the same kind of thing that happens it seems to be in the touch exercises when we're practicing hands-on. that the person's awareness who has, who's receiving the hands-on, it's hard to tell if they notice the shift before the hands-on person notices the shift. It sort of seems like it's a tie. And it's really cool, I think, to start getting a sense of this, the little bit that I get to do hands-on practice, really starting to get comfortable with it and get a sense of how immediate the feedback is. Let's see. Dave tried to give us a demonstration of what power feels like. So soft tongue, and then put the smile inside beneath your ribs and up against the back of your spine, and have the smile facing out. And the ideal state is relaxed and ready. We had a lot of biology about what babies get and what they need and how they develop. And we did more, some of the stuff we did in Intermediate 3 was actually in this training. Lots of the slides, the exercises we did that, the matching where you say, oh, I don't quite feel met, can we start again? We did hands-on several times, and just like I think David's used this language in our classes, so meet, greet, listen, and receive. So we practiced that and talked about working with the belly, because it's part of this ventral vagal complex, and so putting the hand on the belly or rubbing the belly, and then what kinds of responses people have. That in American culture, people seem to be pretty self-conscious about the belly or touching it or noticing it, and that we can name that. We can say, oh, there's a judgment there about the belly, or just say, you know, your belly is your belly. And we can tell people that contact with their belly brain can be helpful. Let's see. Okay, we got 20 minutes. And oh, so only 20 to 30% of the time do we have perfect synchrony in relationship. And so all the rest of it is repair. And I think it helps me to keep hearing that, because the repair piece, you know, I think, you know, my own history and the history of my clients is wanting it to be pretty right on. And we can help people notice what happens in the repair process. We can help them notice and normalize that we're human. So there's no such thing really as all the time perfect synchrony, perfect mirroring. And in relational rupture, we're not looking at acute imminent threat. We're working with behavioral or clinical. We talked about the differences between working with acute imminent threat versus relational trauma. And then for some folks who have relational trauma, they also still have ongoing microaggression or persistent, so racism or any other kind of ism, or abusive, maybe still live in abusive environments. And so those are the really tricky parts. And I felt like it was good to have that delineation of, you know, something's a little bit different when you're working with a client and they still have ongoing threat at the same time. We talked about the 3 kinds of other than secure attachment styles. Let's see. You guys you don't have any questions? You're always holding the possibility for solution when you're working with clients. You just don't always know what it will look like. And this is really important to remember when you're working with relational or developmental trauma, because there's so much of it that it has no explicit memory. It has no explicit component. So we really have to be able to hold that space and to not be so over-focused on the doing something or a technique. We talked a little bit about Gottman's research, and what seems to be about 91% predictive of couples staying together is whether or not a bid for connection is received. So bids can be anything. Hey, honey, look at that thing out there. And if the bid is responded to regularly, then that's highly predictive of success of a couple. When we're working with pervasive or microaggression or environmental aggression, the goal is to help change the relationship to the environment. So we want to create possibilities or choice for the client. Can someone come out of immobility and have some kind of a choice, or helping them achieve optimal arousal? So optimal arousal for someone in an environment of microaggression is going to be different for someone who doesn't have that same thing to contend with. Healthy social engagement is a physical and a physiological state. And understanding the links between the shock trauma, the relational trauma, and the environmental trauma is crucial for working with clients. There's a couple of gut books, and we talked a lot about gut health, that actually nutrition and eating patterns are really crucial for supporting ventral vagal and supporting optimal brain functioning, and how difficult that is to get clients to address that part of the system. But if they can address it, it can make a really big difference. It can really make therapy easier. It can increase their access to their felt sense. Because if they're eating like crap and they feel like crap, then it's just harder. It's harder to encourage anybody to touch into felt sense if it feels like crap. And somebody asked, when they first asked the question about nutrition or diet and gut, Dave said, well, put it simply and bluntly, if you want to feel better, eat better. So there were no magic solutions for that. Good nutritionists, if you have one or know one that you can refer people to. So a couple of gut books. Perlmutter has The Brain Maker, and another book called Grain Brain. And there was an interesting demo. Carrie O'Donnell was there, and we did, I think Dave has done with us also, these demos of where you hold your power, and then he pushes, and to see, can you stay, or how much give is there. And I guess he says, everybody has their own holding pattern. So the adjustments that someone needs to make to drop into this heart and gut connected place, it's different depending on what somebody's kinesiology is. And he said it's just kinesiology. It's just about being able to be in that relaxed, alert state of readiness to be able to respond with the counter movement. So let's see. I've got a little list here of what to track in adults. So when we're trying to track these movements and other things that are relational, we're tracking sensation, spacing out, tightening, anger, and supporting any kind of noticing that's possible. So saying things like, I'm so glad you could tell me that, or how does it feel to be supported in your anger? And especially when there are ruptures. So somebody's pissed off because you went on vacation, or some other administrative piece, or just whatever the rupture is. Can you support that? Can you be there as a support for somebody touching into their sympathetic charge? And then, so you strengthen, when you catch the rupture there, you strengthen it in the physiology, so connecting it to physiology, and then hang out for a little while in the repair, in the feeling of the repair afterward. You can mirror and ask permission. So is it okay to show you what I see, especially when clients are really frozen or dissociated or totally unaware of what their body's doing? And you can say, is it okay to show you what I see, and then do it? And you can let them know I'm exaggerating a little so that you can really see it. Or when people ask, well, how did you know that? Or what did you see? You can explain that, the pulse is actually visible from here. And you can say, I'm curious what you're experiencing because I noticed the pulse increase. And track little changes toward functionality. And this, I think, is really important. And I've started doing this with clients. I'm noticing just that really catching every time there's even the slightest increase toward functionality, and really checking with people to find out how they're managing, how they're coping, because they're coping in between the times you see them, and really reinforcing and noticing that is happening. You can share your own sensations sometimes when you're working with clients, but like any disclosure, the rule is to ask yourself, why this moment, or why this sensation or this feeling? What's the clinical purpose of sharing? If I noticed a sense of something, rather than asking client about what they're noticing, if you feel like it's appropriate, or you can't get them to engage with any part of their sensation, you can carefully or skillfully check with, whatever your body sensations are about what's going on, and make a clinically appropriate decision about whether to share that. And then you want to notice somatic countertransference. So here's a good example of somatic countertransference. So say clients telling you about horrible things that happened to them as a kid, and you could say, I notice you're getting more and more still as you tell me those things. And I notice feeling like a mother bear. So this is good for a lot of times when you notice that the somatic countertransference of they're getting more and more still or shut down, and you're feeling the charge, you're feeling the anger. And you can demonstrate the feeling like a mother bear, or use animals to demonstrate and ask what's it like to know that I'm feeling that way. So there's that competent protector energy that might be available for the client to tap into. Some people have never been able to relax in the presence of a safe other. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is simply creating that space for, and you can imagine like what a baby would want to do, just to be able to relax, to fall asleep, to just be. And can we cultivate that kind of safety, or that kind of space, relational field for the client to be able to be there and to relax? Let's see. Movement helps people arrive in their body. So there are lots of different ways to access movement: rocking, pushing, hands above head, curling and uncurling fists, developmental movement, sequencing. There's a list of developmental reflexes on Dave's website, and the nice pieces, he explains the links to the physiology. Because we talked a lot about how understanding the physiological structures underlying the behavioral piece can help us know as clinicians what piece we want to tap into. So what part of ventral vagal, or what part of sympathetic or parasympathetic system do I want to hook into, or which thing do I want to like raise the charge on at this moment, so you can know which structures to manipulate or to access in the moment. I feel kind of like after this, like I kind of need to take an anatomy class so I can have a better understanding. But I guess we'll get some of that in advanced. And I also, my understanding is that Neil Winblad is going to tape the Charlotte classes that Dave is doing, the base. So maybe it's going to be offered via DVD or something. I'm not sure. So with movement, we can say, how would it feel to allow that movement, which is cool because you don't even have, the client doesn't even have to do anything. You can just say, how might it feel, or how do you think it would feel to allow that movement? Or how old do you feel as you make that movement? And then you can, that's a good access point to connect to young self and do a little bit of repair right there. And you want to make sure you have a witness when you do developmental work. No regression. We want to stay firmly rooted in the present. And that's why that developing the insula is so important, because people without that typically can't stay. They can't stay in the present. So there's the risk of re-traumatization. There's, it turns into abreaction and catharsis, which winds up just recycling the energy. It doesn't discharge the energy. And sometimes clients are very attached to that. They very much like to do that abreacting. You can ask for more movement questions. Is this a familiar feeling? Were you able to do this movement when you were younger? And when you're working with clients and watching and noticing their movements, you're noticing what parts of movement seem to have flow, and where does it seem like some access to movement is missing? Does it seem like there's no access to movement in some part of the field, left or right? Does it seem like eyes skip, or that there's some, like, where is movement impaired? What parts of movement in the field seem to be impeded or seem to be restricted? So that's another good one. The last, I'm going to end with, there's this piece we worked on with reaching, and there are 5 steps in the reach. And let me see if okay. So there's the beginning, the reaching. So the arms come up. You could think of like the kid, pick me up. So there's the intention, right? The I want. And then when the contact comes, and you can explore with clients the full range of this entire reach sequence, and it can be metaphorically expressed in their lives as can't hold on to a job, or can't get started, or can't negotiate. There's somewhere in the middle they can't negotiate the details. They can't yield in order to receive the thing that wants to come. So the 5 steps: reaching, contact, yielding, grasping, and pulling forward. So the sequence is the reach, and then the contact comes. So there's a sensation of it's coming, that you know the object is coming. And then the yielding is your body has to give in order to receive that. So you know it's coming, and there's a softening, so you don't have to keep reaching so hard when you know it's coming, and then you make the contact. And then there's the grasp, and then pull toward. And so this is the receiving here. The other ways you could think about those 5 steps are the reaching, setting intention. Contact is meeting, so the met happens, and then the greeting, and then listening. Grasping is the listening, so you're starting to really take it in, and then pull toward, receiving, taking it in even further. And it's pretty interesting. We worked in triads with this, and people could get a really good sense of where in those parts of the reaching process they were getting stuck. And I've already worked with some clients with that, and they identified the place. There's one step in between 2 of those parts where the block seems to be. So that was really cool. Okay, well, thank you for tuning into this haphazard review of the training I just went to, and I'll leave this video up for a week, and I'll talk to some of you, or some portion of you, pretty soon, and see some of you at Advanced. Love you. Bye.